Let me tell you about a healthcare operator who did everything right. Best-in-class clinical outcomes, strong unit economics, a real brand, and his private equity advisor told him he was probably 6 to 18 months away from a really nice exit. And we're talking multiple seven figures. The operator got their offer, the buyer did their due diligence, and the deal, well, it fell apart. Not because of the business, but because of 3 lease clauses. Clauses that he had signed years before without even blinking. Those clauses gave the buyer's attorney enough ammunition to reprice the deal by 40%. He walked away with a fraction of what he had built. Most operators think about real estate the wrong way. They treat the lease as some sort of necessary evil, something they can get through so they can focus on the operation. But the lease is your business infrastructure. It's a capital allocation decision. It's a scalability decision. And for multi-site operators, it's ultimately a wealth decision. I've spent my career in healthcare real estate. I've sat across the table from landlords, from private equity-backed groups, from single unit owners looking to go from 1 clinic to 5 clinics. I've also sat across the table from multi-unit operators, from going from 20 to 100 clinics. I've seen the same mistakes made over and over again. These are not by careless people, but by smart, busy operators who just simply don't have someone in their corner speaking both the language of real estate and the language of scaling a healthcare business. Today we fix that. These are the 7 lease mistakes that kill clinic growth and the exact frameworks you need to structure every deal like a tier 1 operator. Before we get into the mistakes, I'd like to establish a frame because it changes how you hear everything else. Most tenants negotiate a lease trying to minimize rent. That is the wrong objective. The right objective is to maximize capital efficiency, meaning how do you structure the lease so that every dollar you spend on real estate generates the most possible leverage for growth. Sometimes that means paying more in rent for a landlord-funded build-out. Sometimes it means accepting a longer term in exchange for locking in below market rent bump. That math changes deal by deal, but the mindset has to shift from tenant to operator. And if you're a multi-site operator looking for a PE exit, there's a third lens, durability. Buyers underwriting your business don't just want EBITDA. They also want to know that your locations are stable, that they're contractually protected and transferable, that your leases have to survive your exit. Keep those 3 lenses in mind: capital efficiency, scalability, and durability. And everything that follows will make a lot more sense. Mistake number 1, front-loading the burn. Paying full rent before your patient volume exists. Every new clinic follows more or less the same curve, right? You start marketing, you open, word of mouth spreads, insurance credentialing clears. You hit break even somewhere between month 3 and month 9, just kind of depending on your model. The problem? Most leases are written as if you open at full capacity on day 1. Full market rent from day 1. That gap between what you're paying and what you're producing, that's what I call the burn zone. And every single dollar that you bleed in the burn zone is a dollar that you cannot deploy towards your next location. If you're opening multiple sites per year, this compounds quickly. An operator who's opening, say, 3 new clinics a year, paying full rent for 6 months before hitting break even in each clinic, could be absorbing $250,000 to $300,000 more in unnecessary carrying costs every single year. That's not a rounding error. That's like a whole new clinic. The fix is a rent ramp. This is a completely standard ask in any market with even moderate vacancy. You're looking for 3 to 6 months of free rent or a step-up structure in rent where it escalates as your patient volume increases. Tied to time, not to your performance, because you don't want your landlord inside your business metrics. But negotiate the ramp to match the realistic window before you reach clinical capacity. Sophisticated landlords expect this, and if yours pushes back really hard, that tells you something about how they view the relationship. And it also should inform you on how hard you should push back on everything else. The owner finance build-out, giving your capital to the landlord. Healthcare build-outs are expensive. A properly built clinical space, adequate electrical, medical gas, HVAC zone for each patient room, plumbing for sinks and sterilization in each room. That can run $150 to $500 a square foot. For a 3,000 square foot clinic, you're looking at $500,000 to $1 million in build-out costs before you put a single piece of equipment in. Now here's where operators make a critical mistake. They see a landlord offering a low tenant improvement allowance, say $40 a square foot, and they pair that with a slightly lower rent. The operators think, great, this is a great deal. I'll save on my monthly costs. They're doing the math wrong because what they've actually done is lend money to their landlord at 0% interest in the form of build-out costs that are permanently embedded into the building that they don't own. The correct play, maximize TI allowance. Push for the landlord to fully fund the construction of all the structural and mechanical work, the box, the HVAC, the electrical backbone, and save your cash for the equipment, the branding, the tech stack, and the marketing that actually drives EBITDA. Your capital should be working in the revenue generating layer of your business, not sitting in someone else's walls. One more point. If you negotiate a high TI and end up not using it all, in many markets, you can negotiate to apply that to free rent on the back end. Your broker should know how to structure that, and if they don't, well, that's a separate problem. Losing the exit option, letting your lease expire before your business does. If you ever want to sell your business, say to a strategic buyer or a private equity group or maybe even a competitor, your buyer is going to underwrite your real estate just as close as they underwrite your financials. Here's what they want: site control. They want to know that every major location has enough runway, typically 15 to 20 years of total remaining term, including options, that the business can operate, stabilize, and continue growing without a lease renegotiation risk during their hold period. A lease with 3 years left and 1 5-year option, that's a negotiation risk. That's leverage that the landlord can use against your buyer when the time comes to renegotiate the renewal. And buyers price in that risk, meaning they discount your valuation. The fix is to negotiate multiple 5-year option renewals, ideally 3 or 4, with predetermined rent bumps built in, not fair market value resets, which gives the landlord the opportunity to reprice you to market at every single renewal. Predetermined bumps, fixed escalators, typically 3% annually or 10 to 12% at every renewal period. You know the cost basis at year 15 before you even sign on in year 1. This is what a scalable and sellable platform looks like from a lease structure standpoint. Mistake number 4, weak exclusivity, the clause that lets a competitor move in next door. Every healthcare tenant asks for exclusivity, but almost none ask for the right exclusivity. A generic exclusivity clause that says no other medical tenants sounds protective, but it's not, because medical is not a specialty. And in today's healthcare market that's super competitive, it isn't a satellite hospital that you should worry about. It's a direct care provider that pulls your panel, or a mobile urgent care van that just sets up in the parking lot, or maybe in a behavioral health clinic that starts offering primary care on the side. The way to think about exclusivity is by revenue stream, not by label. What are the specific clinical services that you generate revenue from? List them. Then build your exclusivity clause around protecting those services, not around a generic descriptor. In markets with sophisticated landlords, you may not get everything you ask for, but you'll only get what you negotiate for. And going in specifically asking for what you need signals that you know what you're doing, which changes the entire dynamic at the table. Mistake 5, the warm shell that's actually cold. What you don't know about the building will cost you. This one is operationally brutal, and it's way more common than what it should be. You sign a lease, the space looks fine, it's a vanilla shell, concrete floors, open ceiling, clean walls. Everything looks good, you start to build out, and then the contractor calls. The electrical panel is too small for medical grade equipment. The HVAC is end of life and not sized for the occupancy load that you need. The plumbing stubs, well, they're in the wrong locations for your clinical layout. The slab, well, it has issues too. You're 3 weeks into build out, 6 weeks into your lease, and you're already $75,000 over budget and 45 days behind schedule. And here's the worst part. You have no recourse because you signed the lease as is. This is not a market problem. This is a due diligence problem, and it is 100% preventable. Before you sign any lease for clinical space, you need 3 things. An MEP engineer reviewing the existing mechanical, electrical, and plumbing infrastructure, a structural assessment if the building is older than, say, 20 years, and a delivery condition warranty. In the lease itself, a landlord has a representation that the HVAC, slab, electrical capacity, and utility stubs are all sufficient for medical occupancy. If the landlord won't warranty the delivery conditions, you either get an escrow holdback to cover potential remediation costs, or you walk. There are other sites, and there's only one pool of capital. Mistake 6, term mismatch. Locked in when you should be growing or loose when you need stability. The locked in failure mode. You sign a 10-year lease with no expansion rights. Your model works, your volume far exceeds projections, and by year 3, you're maxed out at every room. You need 2,000 more square feet, but the adjacent suite, well, it's occupied, and you have no expansion rights, and your lease gives you absolutely no out. You're stuck, artificially capacity capped, for 7 more years. The too short failure mode. You sign a 5-year lease thinking you'll reassess after the initial term. The location performs, it becomes your highest volume site. The landlord knows exactly how dependent you are on that location, and they will price accordingly. You're negotiating from zero leverage. The fix is layered. Base term long enough to establish stability. Typically 10 years for a high investment clinical build out. Expansion rights, specifically a right of first refusal or right of first offer on adjacent suites. So if space opens up, you have the first call. If your model is modular enough, a relocation clause within the landlord's portfolio that allows you to upsize without blowing up your economics. This is not exotic. These clauses are standard in commercial lease negotiations. You just have to ask before the LOI is signed. Mistake number 7, thinking in sites, not systems. Negotiating every lease from scratch. This is the mistake that separates operators from builders. Every operator who has scaled past 5 or 6 locations and every group that has successfully exited to PE, they have one thing in common. They stopped negotiating leases and they started deploying a system. When you negotiate every lease as a one-off transaction, you're starting from zero every single time. The landlord's attorney presents you their standard form, you mark it up or redline it, they push back, you compromise, you get a slightly different deal every single site. Different bump structures, different renewal mechanics, different assignment clauses. When a buyer runs diligence on your portfolio, it looks exactly like what it is. An ad hoc collection of real estate decisions made under time pressure. The fix is a Master Lease Rider, a standardized addendum that travels with every new lease negotiation. It captures your non-negotiables, your assignment clause language, your renewal structure, your exclusivity framework, your delivery condition warranty, your TI mechanism. When you hand a landlord your lease rider at the LOI stage, 2 things happen. You compress the negotiation timelines, and you signal early on that you're a sophisticated, institutional quality tenant. There's also a compounding benefit. Every time you add a new clinic in that specific market, landlords talk. When word gets around that you're the tenant who brings a clean process, favorable credit, consistent operations, you start getting calls, not just responding to listings. That's when your pipeline shifts from reactive to proactive. Build the system early, even if you're at 2 or 3 locations right now. The operators who wait until they're at 8 or 10 locations to systematize are the ones who spend 6 to 12 months cleaning up their portfolio before an exit instead of building their business. Let me bring this back to where we started. The operator who nearly lost his exit, the one I told you about at the top of the video, he didn't fail because he made all 7 of these mistakes. He made 3 of them, 3 clauses, and they cost him years of compounded work. Real estate is not a support function in a healthcare business. It is core infrastructure. It's capital allocation. It's the foundation that either supports your scale or quietly erodes it. If you've been in a lease for 2 or 3 years and you've never had a healthcare specific operator lens on it, that's worth the conversation because renewals, extensions, and portfolio transactions give you renegotiation windows that most operators never use. And if you're about to sign a new lease, especially for a flagship location or a new market, do not go into that room relying on a generalist broker whose incentive is just to close the deal, not to protect your long-term position. I work with healthcare operators who are scaling, those that want to go from 3 clinics to 20 or 20 to 100 or more. Maybe you're looking for a bigger institutional exit, and I offer a strategic real estate audit. We look at your current lease portfolio, we map the vulnerabilities, we build a framework for every single deal that you do going forward so that your real estate compounds your growth instead of capping it. The link is in the description, no obligation, 30 minutes, and if it's not useful, I'll tell you. And if you're not ready for that, subscribe and stay in the feed. I put out real frameworks, not just generic broker content. See you in the next one.